Miguel Herrera was walking through the wasteland of the industrial zone when his foot hit something metallic. It was his second week as a security guard at the Guadalajara business complex. The object shone under the midday sun. He bent down and unearthed a golden plaque with the initials RV engraved. "What is this?" murmured Miguel, wiping the dirt away with his shirt. The plaque was shaped like a sports medal. On the reverse, it read, "Rodrigo Vasquez, State Swimming Champion 2016. Miguel frowned. That name sounded familiar. He walked to the security booth and turned on his computer. He searched in Google, "Rodrigo Vasquez Guadalajara missing." The results made him pale. Newspaper articles from 7 years ago filled the screen. Businessman's twins mysteriously disappear. Massive search for the Vasquez brothers. Unsolved case shocks Guadalajara. Miguel read the details. Diego and Rodrigo Vasquez, 16-year-old twins, sons of Antonio Vasquez, owner of Vasquez Construction, had disappeared on March 15, 2017. They left their home in Las Aguilas to go to swimming practice at the sports club. They never arrived. The search had lasted for months. Police, army, volunteer groups, private investigators. Nothing. As if the earth had swallowed them whole. The case was closed as an unresolved disappearance. Miguel picked up his phone and dialed the local police. Detective Carlos Mendoza. "How can I help you, Detective? I'm Miguel Herrera, security guard at the industrial complex on Lopez Mateo Avenue. I found something that might be related to an old case." "What kind of thing?" "A swimming medal belonging to Rodrigo Vasquez, one of the twins who disappeared 7 years ago." Silence lingered for several seconds. "Where exactly did you find it?" "In the vacant lot behind the office building of Selena Sánchez Asociados." "Don't touch anything else. I'm on my way." Miguel hung up and placed the medal in a plastic bag. He went back to the exact spot where he had found it and marked the area with traffic cones. 30 minutes later, Detective Mendoza arrived, a 45-year-old man with a gray mustache and a stern expression. A forensic technician accompanied him. "Are you Herrera?" "Yes, sir. The medal is here." Mendoza examined the bag without opening it. "How long have you been working here?" 2 weeks. "Have you noticed anything unusual?" "No, sir. I just walk around here every 2 hours. This land has been abandoned as long as I can remember." The forensic technician began scanning the area with a metal detector. Within minutes, the device beeped. "Detective, there's something else here." They carefully dug and found a silver chain with an identical medal, but with the initials DV and the name Diego Vasquez. "2 medals," murmured Mendoza. Miguel approached. "Do you think they're buried here?" "It's possible. We're going to need a full excavation team." Mendoza grabbed his radio. "Central, I need a complete forensic team at my location. Possible crime scene related to the 2017 Vasquez case." While waiting for reinforcements, Mendoza questioned Miguel about the details of the find. "What time do you make your rounds?" "Every 2 hours from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. "What businesses operate in this complex?" "Mainly offices." Selena Asociados is the largest. There's also a law firm, an accounting firm, and some import companies. "Salinas and Asociados. Herman Salinas?" "Yes, he's the owner." Mendoza jotted the name in his notebook. He remembered Herman Salinas had once been a business partner of Antonio Vasquez, the twins' father. At 4 p.m., the full forensic team arrived. They began a systematic excavation of the area. At a depth of 1.5 meters, they found clothing remains. Jeans, sports shoes, swimming club t-shirts. "Detective," shouted one of the technicians, "I found something important." At the bottom of the dig were 2 school backpacks, one blue, one red. The names were written with marker. Diego Vasquez, Cervantes High School, and Rodrigo Vasquez, Cervantes High School. Mendoza stepped to the edge of the excavation. "Any human remains?" "No bones yet, just personal belongings." "Keep digging. Expand the perimeter." Miguel watched from a safe distance, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the discovery. After 7 years, he had stumbled upon the first real clue to the fate of the Vasquez brothers. Mendoza picked up his phone. "I need the phone number of Elena Vasquez." Elena Vasquez, the twins' elder sister, had been the public face of the search for years. She organized marches, handed out flyers, offered rewards, and worked as a journalist at the local newspaper El Occidental. "Hello, Elena Vasquez?" "Yes, who's speaking?" "Detective Carlos Mendoza, Guadalajara Police. I have news about your brothers." "You found them." "We found evidence, personal belongings. I need you to come and identify them." "Where are you?" "In the vacant lot behind the Lopez Mateo Industrial Complex." "I am on my way immediately." Elena hung up and ran to her car. For 7 years she had imagined this moment. Every time the phone rang, every time she saw a police car, she wondered if there was finally news of Diego and Rodrigo. She arrived 40 minutes later. The area was cordoned off with yellow tape. 3 patrol cars, an ambulance, and a forensic van were there. "Detective Mendoza? Ms. Vasquez? I'm sorry for the circumstances, but I need you to identify these items." He showed her the medals, the backpacks, and some clothes and evidence bags. Elena recognized everything immediately. The swimming medals the twins had won the year before they disappeared, the backpacks they carried that last day to the sports club, the Nike sneakers she had bought them for their 16th birthday. "They're mine," she confirmed with a trembling voice. "Everything belongs to Diego and Rodrigo." "Are you certain?" "Completely. I embroidered their names on the backpacks myself. These medals were in their room. How did they end up here?" "That's what we're going to find out." Detective Mendoza opened the Vasquez case files in his office. 7 years of documents, photos, testimonies, and false leads. The file filled 3 boxes. Elena sat across from his desk. "I want to go over everything from the beginning," said Mendoza. "Maybe now, with this new evidence, we'll find something we missed. Whatever you need." Detective Mendoza pulled out the initial report. "March 15, 2017. Your brothers left home at 3 p.m. to go to Club Deportivo Guadalajara. Swimming training at 4. They never arrived." "Exactly. The coaches waited until 5. Then they called home. My father, Antonio Vasquez, reported the disappearance at 6. Elena nodded. "Dad went hysterical. He said something terrible had happened. The boys never missed practice." Mendoza read more details. The twins' car, a blue Honda Civic, was found abandoned in the Plaza del Sol mall parking lot. No signs of violence. Keys inside. Wallets intact. That never made sense. Why would they go to Plaza del Sol if they had to be at the sports club? "The original theory was kidnapping. Your father was a successful businessman. He had money, but no ransom was ever demanded." Mendoza turned the pages. Family members, friends, schoolmates, and his father's employees had been questioned. All had solid alibis, including Germán Salinas. Salinas had been interrogated 3 times. Business partner of their father since 2010, he claimed he had been in his office all afternoon on March 15th, working on a construction project. Elena frowned. "Germán always seemed strange to me, very nervous whenever he talked to us during the search." "Nervous in what way?" "He avoided eye contact, changed the subject when we mentioned specific leads, and always insisted the boys had probably run away." Mendoza wrote this down in his notebook. "What exactly was the business relationship between your father and Salinas?" "Constructora Vasquez built residential buildings. Salinas y Asociados was the firm that handled all the permits, construction licenses, government paperwork. A lucrative business, very lucrative. Dad always said Germán had important contacts at City Hall." Mendoza pulled out a photograph of the scene where the Honda Civic had been found. "Look at this picture. The car was parked in the farthest corner of the mall, almost hidden." Elena studied the image. "As if someone wanted it to go unnoticed as long as possible." "Exactly. Did your brothers know that area?" "Not at all. We always shopped at Plaza Patria, which is much closer to home."
Mendoza continued reviewing the file. The original detective, Ramirez, was now retired, but his notes were very detailed. He pulled out a yellowed sheet. Here it says he interrogated all the employees of Constructora Vasquez, workers, supervisors, secretaries. Nobody knew anything. And the employees of Salinas y Asociados were also questioned. Germán Salinas provided a complete list of his staff. Elena leaned forward. "Detective, there's something we never told the original police." "What's that?" "The week before the disappearance, Diego and Rodrigo came home very shaken. They said they had seen something they shouldn't have." Mendoza looked up from the file. "Why didn't you report this?" "Dad told them to stay quiet. He said it was probably their imagination, and he didn't want to create unnecessary problems." "What exactly had they seen?" "Something in Selina's office. They had gone to deliver some documents for Dad. They said they saw Germán handing an envelope full of money to a government official." "A government official? Whoa!" "They didn't know. An older man in a black suit. Dad knew about it. He told them Germán had many clients, and it was surely a normal payment. But the boys insisted something was off." "Off? How?" The official looked nervous. Germán shut the door immediately when he saw them, and told them they hadn't seen anything. Mendoza scribbled furiously in his notebook. "This changes everything. Why did your father tell them to keep quiet?" "Dad was always very careful with business. He didn't want to make an enemy of Germán. He said he needed to maintain good business relations." "When exactly did they see this?" "March 8th, a week before they disappeared." Mendoza calculated mentally. Plenty of time for someone to arrange a permanent solution. Elena shivered. "Do you think Germán killed them?" "It's too soon for conclusions, but we definitely need to interrogate him again." Mendoza closed the file. "Where is your father now?" "He died 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. I think losing the twins destroyed him inside." "I'm very sorry." "Did he ever say why he suspected Germán?" "Yes, before he died, Dad confessed he always suspected him, but never had proof. After the disappearance, Germán completely changed. He became more aggressive in business, started expanding his firm quickly, as if suddenly he had lots of money available." Mendoza noted more details. "Constructora Vasquez kept working with Salinas y Asociados for a few more months. Then your father ended the partnership. He said he no longer trusted Germán." "How did Salinas react?" "He was furious. He threatened to sue us. Said Dad owed him money from pending projects." "Did he?" "No, the opposite. Salinas owed Dad for 3 projects he never completed." Mendoza checked his watch. "It's 6 p.m. Salinas's office must be closed." "Are you going to arrest him?" "First, I need more evidence, but tomorrow morning I'll interrogate him." Elena stood. "Detective, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "I want to be present when you question him." "That's not standard protocol." "Please, I've waited 7 years for answers. I need to hear what he has to say." Mendoza considered the request. "All right, but only as an observer. You can't interrupt the interrogation. Understood?" Elena left the office with a mix of hope and terror. After 7 years of uncertainty, they were finally close to the truth about Diego and Rodrigo. The next morning, Detective Mendoza arrived at the offices of Salinas y Asociados at 8 a.m. The building was a modern glass and steel structure in Guadalajara's business district. Elena was waiting for him in the parking lot. "Are you ready for this?" "I've been ready for 7 years." They went up to the 5th floor. The receptionist, a young woman with glasses, greeted them with a professional smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Mendoza showed his badge. "Detective Carlos Mendoza, Guadalajara Police. I need to speak with Mr. Germán Salinas." The receptionist's smile faded. "Is it urgent? Mr. Salinas has a very important meeting." "It's about a homicide case." "Yes, it's urgent." One moment, please. The receptionist dialed an internal extension. Mr. Salinas, there's a detective here who wants to speak with you. Yes, sir. He says it's about a homicide. All right. She hung up. Mr. Salinas will see you in 5 minutes. Mendoza and Elena sat in the waiting chairs. The office was luxurious. Italian leather furniture, expensive artwork on the walls. Look at all this luxury, murmured Elena. 7 years ago, this office was much more modest. Mendoza observed the details. State-of-the-art computers, flat-screen TVs, a professional espresso machine. Do you remember how it used to be? Old furniture, one single computer, cheap decoration. Exactly. Herman prospered right after my brothers disappeared. The main office door opened. Out came Herman Salinas, a 50-year-old man with graying hair, an expensive suit, and a sturdy build. His expression shifted when he saw Elena. Elena, what are you doing here? Good morning, Herman. Salinas turned to Mendoza. Detective, right? I'm Herman Salinas. How can I help you? We need to talk about Diego and Rodrigo Vasquez. Salinas's expression hardened. That case was closed years ago. I have nothing new to add. Yesterday, we found new evidence. What kind of evidence? Personal belongings of the twins in a lot near your office. Near my office? How strange. Shall we speak in private? Of course. They entered a spacious office with a panoramic view of the city. Salinas closed the door and sat behind a mahogany desk. Where exactly did you find these belongings? In the vacant lot behind this building. Ah, that lot doesn't belong to me. It's municipal property. Mendoza opened his notebook. Mr. Salinas, I need to review your alibi for March 15, 2017. Detective, I've already spoken to the police several times about that.
There have been new developments. I need to verify certain details. Salinas sighed with irritation. I was here in the office all afternoon working on the plans for the Las Palmas residential project. Can anyone confirm that? My secretary at the time, Luz Maria Hernandez. Where is she now? She resigned 5 years ago, moved to Tijuana. Elena leaned forward. Herman, my brothers saw you a week before they disappeared. Saw me where? Here in your office, handing money to a government official. Salinas's expression instantly changed. The color drained from his face. I don't know what you're talking about. Diego and Rodrigo told Dad they saw you handing an envelope full of bills to a man in a suit. That's ridiculous. I don't bribe officials. Mendoza intervened. Why didn't you mention this incident during the original investigations? Because it never happened. The twins told their family you ordered them to keep quiet about what they had seen. That's a lie. Salinas stood up abruptly from his chair. Detective, I will not tolerate unfounded accusations. No one is accusing you of anything yet. We're only verifying information. Information about what? About the possibility that Diego and Rodrigo were murdered because they saw something they shouldn't have. Salinas turned toward the window, back to them. This is absurd. The boys went away. They're probably living in another country. With what money? Elena asked. They were minors. They had no passports, no bank accounts of their own. Teenagers find ways. Herman, you'd known my brothers since they were children. They had never caused trouble. Why would they run away? Salinas turned back to her. Elena, I know it's painful to accept, but sometimes young people make impulsive decisions. Mendoza checked his notes. Mr. Salinas, can you explain the sudden growth of your company after March 2017? What sudden growth? This building, the new equipment, the staff expansion, all of that happened in the months following the disappearance. I was lucky with a few big projects. Which projects? Salinas hesitated for a few seconds. Various residential developments, government contracts. Can you be more specific? Detective, my business records are confidential. Not if they're related to a homicide case. There is no homicide. No bodies have been found. Elena and Mendoza exchanged glances. Salinas' reaction was too defensive. How do you know we haven't found bodies? Asked Mendoza. Why? Because if you had, it would be all over the news. The investigation is ongoing. We haven't released any information to the press. Salinas moved toward the door. This conversation is over. If you want to interrogate me further, you can do it with my lawyer present. Why do you need a lawyer if you've done nothing wrong? Because you're trying to pin something on me that I didn't do. Mendoza stood. Mr. Salinas, do not leave the city without notifying the police. Are you arresting me? No, but you are a person of interest in an active investigation. Salinas opened the door. Good day, Detective Elena. Elena and Mendoza left the office. In the elevator, Elena broke the silence. He's lying. His body language gave him away. He's definitely hiding something, but we need more evidence. What's next? We're going to investigate his finances. If he received illegal money, there must be a trail. They left the building. Mendoza looked toward the vacant lot where the twins' belongings had been found. You know what strikes me? What? That lot has a direct view of Salinas' office windows. If he buried something there, he could monitor it from his desk. Elena followed his gaze. As a constant reminder of what he'd done, or to make sure no one else discovered it? Detective, do you think my brothers are dead? Mendoza considered the question carefully. The evidence points that way, but until we find remains, we can't be certain. What we do know is that Germán Salinas knows more than he admits. Detective Mendoza contacted the Financial Crimes Department of the Jalisco Prosecutor's Office. He needed to analyze Germán Salinas' bank accounts since March 2017. Elena waited in the conference room while Mendoza reviewed documents with the specialized prosecutor, Licenciada Patricia Morales. What did you find? Asked Mendoza. Something very interesting, Morales replied, spreading out several bank statements. Look at these deposits. Mendoza studied the numbers. April 2017, deposit of 2.5 million pesos. May, another of 1.8 million. June, 3.2 million. Where did that money come from? Officially from government contracts. But here's the strange thing. Morales showed another set of documents. These contracts were awarded without public bidding, direct assignment by the Guadalajara Department of Public Works. That's legal. Only under exceptional circumstances, emergencies, national security projects, things like that. What were these projects? Road maintenance, remodeling of government offices, construction of pedestrian bridges. Nothing that qualifies as an emergency. Mendoza noted the details. Who authorized these direct assignments? Engineer Raúl Dominguez, Director of Public Works. Is he still in that position? Yes, he's been in office for 8 years. Mendoza remembered the description Elena had given of the official Diego and Rodrigo saw receiving money, an older man in a suit with a black BMW. Licenciada, can you get me information on Engineer Dominguez? What car he drives, his address, background? Of course. Do you suspect he's involved? It's possible. The missing twins witnessed a money exchange between Salinas and a government official. Morales made some calls. Half an hour later, she had the information. Raúl Dominguez, 58 years old, married, 3 children, drives a 2016 black BMW X5, lives in a 4 million peso house in Zapopan. What's his official salary? 45,000 pesos a month. Mendoza calculated mentally. 540,000 pesos a year. He can't afford a 4 million peso house on that. Definitely not, unless he has additional income. Can we check his bank accounts? We'd need a court order, but I can investigate his asset declarations. Do it. Mendoza returned with Elena to the conference room. What did you discover?
Germán Salinas received more than 15 million pesos in no-bid government contracts during 2017, all authorized by the same official, Engineer Dominguez. Exactly. And conveniently, he drives a black BMW. Elena straightened in her chair. That must be the man Diego and Rodrigo saw. Very likely. Now we need to connect the dots. Mendoza drew a diagram on the whiteboard. Dominguez authorizes no-bid contract. Salinas receives millions of pesos. Diego and Rodrigo see them exchanging money. A week later, the twins disappear. Do you think Dominguez is also involved in the murder? At least in the cover-up. If the twins had spoken, their corruption scheme would have been exposed. Elena stepped closer to the whiteboard. Detective, how many more people could be involved? We don't know, but this type of systematic corruption usually requires a wide network. Licenciada Morales returned with more documents. I found something important. Dominguez's asset declarations. What do they say? In 2016, he declared assets worth 800,000 pesos. In 2018, he declared 6,200,000 pesos, an increase of more than 700% in 2 years. And here's the most interesting part. Dominguez bought his house in Zapopan on April 20th, 2017. Mendoza checked his timeline. 5 weeks after the twins disappeared. Coincidence? I don't believe in coincidences. Elena intervened. Detective, we need to interrogate Dominguez. Yes, but carefully. If he's involved in murder, he could try to flee or destroy evidence. Morales added more information. There's something else. I reviewed other contracts authorized by Dominguez. Salinas and Associates is not the only company that benefited. At least 3 more companies received no-bid contracts worth millions of pesos.
Mendoza felt the case was becoming more complicated. We're looking at a network of corruption much larger than I thought. Do you think the other companies are also involved in the disappearance? It's possible. Or maybe Salinas acted alone to protect the entire scheme. Elena studied the documents. Detective, what if Dominguez decides to confess? Could he implicate Germán in the murder? That depends on how much he knows. If Salinas told him what he did, we have a key witness. And if he knows nothing about the murder, then we'll have to build the case only with physical and circumstantial evidence. Morales closed the files. Detective, I recommend requesting search warrants for the offices and residences of both Salinas and Dominguez. On what grounds? Evidence of government fraud and possible homicide. We have sufficient probable cause. Mendoza checked his watch. It's 4 p.m. We can get the warrants today. Judge Hernandez is available. I can draft the requests immediately. Do it. I want both places searched early morning. Elena stood up. Detective, can I go with you during the searches? No, Elena, it's too dangerous. If these men murdered your brothers, they could react violently. I understand, but I want to be close. You can wait at the station while we carry out the operations. Morales organized the documents. Detective, is there something else you should consider? What? If this corruption network is as extensive as it seems, they might have accomplices inside the police. Mendoza felt a chill. You're suggesting someone in my department is involved? It's a possibility. These kinds of schemes require official protection. What do you recommend? Keep the investigation in a tight circle. Only people you absolutely trust. Elena looked at both men. Who can we trust? In very few people. For now, only the 3 of us. At 6 a.m., Detective Mendoza organized 2 search teams, one for Germán Salinas' residence, another for Engineer Dominguez's house. Elena waited at headquarters, following everything over the radio. Team 1 arriving at the Salinas residence, reported Sergeant Lopez over the radio. Team 2 in position at Casa Dominguez, confirmed Lieutenant Ruiz. Mendoza coordinated both operations from his patrol car. Execute the warrants simultaneously. We don't want one alerting the other. Understood, Detective.
Salinas' house was in an exclusive gated community in Zapopan. Automatic gate, large garden, 2 stories, and swimming pool. Sergeant Lopez rang the bell. "Germán Salinas, Guadalajara Police, we have a search warrant." There was no answer. Lopez rang again. "Open the door or we'll break it down." Finally, footsteps were heard. Salinas opened the door, dressed in a robe and slippers. "What does this mean?" Lopez showed him the court order. "Search warrant, signed by Judge Hernandez. We'll be looking for evidence related to government fraud and homicide." "This is ridiculous. I'm calling my lawyer." "You can call whoever you want, but the search proceeds." Simultaneously, Lieutenant Ruiz knocked on Dominguez's door. A middle-aged woman answered. "Mrs. Dominguez?" "Yes." "We're with the Guadalajara police. Search warrant for this property." The woman turned pale. "Search? Why? Is your husband home?" "He's having breakfast. We need both of you to remain in the living room while we search the house." Ruiz entered with his team. Dominguez was sitting at the dining table reading the newspaper. "Engineer Raul Dominguez?" "Yes, that's me." "Lieutenant Ruiz, Guadalajara Police. Search warrant." Dominguez read the document with a panicked expression. "There must be a mistake. I haven't committed any crime." "That will be determined during the investigation." At Salinas' house, the forensic team was methodically going through each room. In his home office, they found a safe. "Mr. Salinas, we need you to open the safe." "I have no obligation to do so." "We can force it open with judicial authorization." Salinas hesitated for several minutes before entering the combination. The safe contained documents, jewelry, and several bundles of cash. "Why do you need so much cash at home?" Lopez asked. "They're personal savings." "How much money is here?" Lopez counted the bills, approximately 400,000 pesos in cash. "Money not declared in his bank accounts," muttered the forensic technician. At Dominguez's house, the team found something more incriminating. In a locked desk drawer, there was a notebook with detailed notes. "Lieutenant, looks this," said one of the investigators. The notebook contained dates, company names, and amounts of money. Salinas and Associates, 250,000, March 15th. Constructora del Bajío, 180,000, March 22. Desarrollos Tapatíos, 320,000, March 30. "Looks like a record of payments received," observed Ruiz. Dominguez tried to approach. That's just work information." "Work information? Why keep it at home?" "It's confidential material." "Engineer, these notes look like a record of bribes." At that moment, Mendoza received calls from both teams reporting their findings. "Detective, at Salinas' house, we found 400,000 pesos in undeclared cash." "Anything else?" "Government contract documents, computers, cell phones, everything is being cataloged." "And at Dominguez's house?" "A notebook with detailed records of payments, dates matching the awarding of contracts." "Excellent. Bring both of them to headquarters for interrogation." Elena heard everything over the radio. 7 years of uncertainty seemed to be coming to an end. At 10 a.m., Salinas and Dominguez were in separate interrogation rooms. Mendoza decided to speak first with Dominguez, who seemed more nervous. "Engineer, we found your notebook of records." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Salinas and Associates, 250,000, March 15th? What does this mean?" Dominguez was sweating profusely. They're work notes." "Work notes about receiving cash? You don't receive cash payments?" Mendoza opened the file with the bank statements. "Your financial declarations show a 500% increase in 2 years. How do you explain that?" "Successful investments." "What kind of investments?" "Real estate." "Engineer, we have evidence that you authorized multi-million peso contracts without public bidding in exchange for bribes." Dominguez collapsed in his chair. "I need a lawyer." "You can have a lawyer, but you can also cooperate with the investigation." Cooperate how? By telling us everything about your relationship with Herman Salinas. In the adjacent room, Salinas waited with his lawyer, attorney Fernando Castillo. Detective Mendoza, said Castillo, my client will not answer questions without my presence. Of course. Does your client want to explain the 400,000 pesos in cash we found in his house? Salinas looked at his lawyer, who nodded. They're personal savings. Savings from what? From my legitimate businesses. Mr. Salinas, we have evidence you received more than 15 million pesos in fraudulent government contracts. Those contracts were legally awarded without public bidding. How did you obtain those awards? Salinas remained silent. Mendoza changed strategy. Let's talk about Diego and Rodrigo Vesquez. Salinas's expression immediately changed. I already told you I don't know anything about their disappearance. The twins saw you handing money to Engineer Dominguez on March 8th. That's false. Dominguez is already cooperating with the investigation. Salinas looked at his lawyer in panic. What exactly is he saying? That you two had a corruption scheme and that Diego and Rodrigo were murdered because they discovered it. I didn't kill anyone. The lawyer intervened. My client does not admit responsibility for any crime. Mendoza leaned forward. Mr. Salinas, if you cooperate now, we can consider reducing the charges. What kind of cooperation? Tell us exactly what happened to the Vasquez twins. Salinas whispered something to his lawyer. After several minutes of private conversation, Castillo spoke. My client is willing to provide information about the corruption scheme, but denies any involvement in homicide. What information can he provide? Salinas took a deep breath. Raul Dominguez asked me for money in exchange for contracts. I agreed because I needed the work. How much money? 15% of each contract's value. For how long? 2 years, from 2016 to 2018. What happened in 2018? I ended the business relationship. It was becoming too dangerous. Mendoza noted down all the details. Diego and Rodrigo saw you handing money to Engineer Dominguez. Salinas hesitated. Possibly. What do you mean possibly? They came into my office unannounced on March 8th. Dominguez was there, collecting his payment. The twins saw the money. They might have seen it.
What did you do? I told them they hadn't seen anything and to keep their mouths shut. How did they react? They looked scared, but they said they wouldn't say anything. Mendoza felt he was close to the truth. A week later, they disappeared. Coincidence? I don't know what happened to them. Mr. Salinas, you killed Diego and Rodrigo Vasquez. No, I would never hurt them. The interrogation continued, but Mendoza knew he needed more physical evidence to prove the homicide. Detective Mendoza returned with Dominguez after a 2-hour break. The engineer looked demoralized and had asked to speak without a lawyer. Engineer, are you ready to tell us the truth, detective? I didn't kill those boys, but I know who did. Dominguez nodded slowly. It was Herman, but I didn't want it to happen. Tell me exactly what occurred. Dominguez wiped the sweat from his forehead. On March 8th, I went to Herman's office to collect my monthly payment, 250,000 pesos in cash, and the twins arrived. They suddenly came in and saw the money on the desk. What did Salinas do? He got very nervous. He yelled at them to leave immediately. How did Diego and Rodrigo react? They got very scared, but managed to see the bills. What happened then? Herman closed the door and told me we had a very big problem. Mendoza wrote down all the details. Why was it such a big problem? Because the boys were sons of Antonio Vasquez, Herman's business partner. If they told their father, our whole operation would collapse. What did Salinas propose? At first, he said he would talk to Antonio, that he would pay him to keep quiet. But the next day, he came to my office very upset. He said Antonio wouldn't accept money and would probably report us. So, what did you decide? Dominguez lowered his head.
Herman said we had to eliminate the problem. Eliminate how? At first, he talked about scaring them, threatening them to keep quiet, but it escalated into something else. Yes, when he realized the boys had already told their father what they saw. Mendoza straightened up. How did he know that? Herman had contacts inside Constructora Vasquez, employees who reported conversations to him. Who? The accountant, Jorge Medina, and the secretary, Rosa Gonzalez. They also received money, small payments for information, 5,000 pesos a month each. Mendoza added more names to his list of accomplices. What information did they give about the twins? That they came home very nervous on March 8 and told their father about the money exchange. How did Antonio Vasquez react? He told them to stay quiet, not to cause problems, but Jorge Medina reported that Antonio was suspicious. Suspicious of what? That Herman had dirty business. Dominguez continued the narrative. On March 14, Herman came to me completely desperate. What had happened? Rosa Gonzalez reported that Antonio had been reviewing all of Herman's contracts, looking for irregularities, and he found them. He began to note the pattern. All contracts awarded without bidding, all for very high amounts. Mendoza understood how the crisis had developed. Antonio was about to uncover the whole scheme. Exactly. And if he discovered it, not only would we lose the business, we'd go to jail. What solution did Salinas propose? Dominguez trembled before answering. He said the problem had to be solved at the root. Meaning killing the twins? He didn't say it directly, but I understood. You agreed? I didn't want to, but Herman said if we didn't, we would all go down. Him, me, Jorge, Rosa, and possibly others involved in the scheme. How many more people were involved? At least 5 more businessmen, all paying bribes for contracts. Give me names. Constructora del Bajío, Desarrollos Tapatíos, Inmobiliaria San Patricio, Pavimentos del Occidente. All of them paid bribes? Yes. Among all of us, we moved about 50 million pesos a year. Mendoza mentally calculated the size of the corruption network. How much money did you receive? About 8 million a year. And Salinas? He coordinated everything, received the money from the companies, and paid me my part. How much did he keep? Around 15 million annually. A very lucrative operation. Too lucrative to risk for 2 teenagers. Mendoza understood the economic motive of the crime, how they planned the murder. Herman said it had to look like a disappearance, that the bodies should never be found. Why? Because without bodies, there is no homicide, only missing persons. What was the specific plan? Intercept the twins on their way to the sports club. Take them to a safe place. Herman had a warehouse on the outskirts of the city where he kept construction materials. What happened on March 15th? Dominguez began to cry. I drove my BMW. Herman was in his truck. We waited for the boys on Lopez Mateo Sur. How did you intercept them? Herman signaled them to pull over. He had known them since they were children, so they didn't suspect anything. What did you tell them? That there was an emergency with their father, that they had to come with us immediately. They agreed? At first, yes, but when they realized we were driving in the opposite direction, they got nervous. What did they do? Diego tried to jump out of the car. Herman had to physically stop him. You took them to the warehouse. Yes, there Herman explained the situation, told them they had seen something they shouldn't have, and that if they talked, many people would go to jail. How did the twins react? They said they wouldn't say anything anymore, that they promised to keep the secret. But Salinas didn't believe them. He said it was too risky to let them live. Dominguez broke completely. Detective, I tried to convince him to let them go, but he had already decided. What did he do? He strangled them with his own hands. You witnessed the murder? I had to help him with Rodrigo. He was very strong. Mendoza felt nauseous. Where are the bodies? In Herman's warehouse, buried under the concrete floor. Exact address, Chapala Highway, kilometer 23, El Roble Industrial Warehouse. Mendoza immediately contacted the forensic team. I need an excavation team on the Chapala Highway, kilometer 23, possible human remains location. Dominguez's confession had completely opened the case, but Mendoza knew he still needed more physical evidence for solid convictions. At 2 p.m., 3 forensic teams arrived at El Roble Industrial Warehouse. Elena insisted on accompanying Detective Mendoza, who finally agreed after much persuasion. Elena must be prepared for what we might find. I've been preparing for myself for 7 years, Detective. The warehouse was a concrete structure of about 500 meters square. It was empty, except for some construction materials covered with tarps. According to Dominguez, the bodies are buried under the floor, explained the forensic team leader, Dr. Raul Castaneda. How will we locate them exactly? With ground-penetrating radar, it can detect soil disturbances under concrete. The team began methodically scanning the floor. After 2 hours, the radar detected 2 anomalies in a corner of the building. Detective, there is something here. 2 objects buried about 2 meters deep. Elena approached the marked area. Her legs trembled at the thought that Diego and Rodrigo might be down there. What do you need to excavate? Specialized equipment. This will take several hours. While the forensic team organized the excavation, Mendoza received an urgent call. Detective, this is Sergeant Lopez. Herman Salinas escaped from his house. How? His lawyer left headquarters an hour ago. Apparently, he went straight to warn Salinas. There was no surveillance at his house, only 1 patrol. Salinas left through the back door while the officer watched the main entrance. Mendoza cursed under his breath. Do you know where he went? His truck was seen on the highway to Puerto Vallarta. Set up roadblocks on all highways. Issue an immediate arrest warrant. Elena overheard the conversation. Detective, Herman is escaping. Apparently, yes, but he can't get far. All authorities are already alerted. The excavation continued until 6 p.m. At that depth, the team found the first remains. Detective, I confirmed the presence of human remains, reported Dr. Raul Castaneda. Elena covered her mouth with her hands. After 7 years of hope, the reality was devastating. Can you determine how many bodies? 2 young individuals, apparently male, approximately teenagers. Cause of death? Preliminary asphyxiation, but we need full forensic analysis. Mendoza put his hand on Elena's shoulder. I'm very sorry. Elena couldn't hold back her tears. At least now we know the truth. While the forensic team continued, Mendoza received another call. Detective, this is Lieutenant Ruiz. We located Salinas's truck. It was abandoned at Puerto Vallarta Airport. Apparently, he bought a plane ticket. To where? Mexico City. The flight left 20 minutes ago. Contact Mexico City Airport Police. Arrest him when he lands. We already did, but there's a problem. What problem? The flight has a connection to Miami. If he makes it, he could leave the country. Mendoza looked at his watch. What time does he arrive in Mexico City? In an hour. The Miami connection leaves 2 hours later. That gives us time. Confirmed he's on the flight. Yes, he used his real ID.
Elena approached Mendoza. What if he escapes the country? Mexico has extradition treaties with the U.S., but the process could take years. We can't let him escape. He won't escape. Trust me. At 8 p.m., Dr. Castaneda finished the excavation. Detective, we've recovered both bodies. They're reasonably well preserved due to the cement. Can you confirm identity? We'll need dental and DNA analysis, but based on age, height, and clothing found, I'm confident they are Diego and Rodrigo Vasquez.
Elena approached the covered remains. May I see them? Elena, it's not recommended, Mendoza warned. I need to see them. They're my brothers. Dr. Castaneda carefully lifted the sheet. The remains were in an advanced state of skeletonization, but the clothing was recognizable.
Elena immediately identified the sports club uniforms. It's them! Those are the uniforms they were wearing on the last day. Mendoza received another call. Detective, this is Captain Garcia from the Mexico City Airport Police. We arrested Salinas. We have a problem. Salinas didn't get off the plane. How is that possible? Apparently, he realized they were waiting for him. He never left the plane and continued on the connection to Miami. Mendoza felt frustration. Can you contact the Miami authorities? We already did, but the flight doesn't arrive until tomorrow morning. Elena listened to everything. Detective, what does this mean? That Salinas is on the run, but we have enough evidence to convict him in absentia, and if he never returns, sooner or later, we'll find him. Murderers can't run forever. Dr. Castañeda arranged the transfer of the remains to the Forensic Medical Service. Detective, the full analyses will be ready in a week. Cause of death can be confirmed. Mechanical asphyxiation, manual strangulation based on fractures of the hyoid bone. Elena shuddered as she heard the technical details of how her brothers had died. At 10 p.m., Mendoza and Elena returned to headquarters. Elena, I know it's been a very difficult day, but we finally have answers. Thank you, Detective. Without you, we never would have known the truth. What are you going to do now? Call my family, arrange a proper funeral for Diego and Rodrigo, and then make sure Germán Salinas pays for what he did, no matter where he hides. Mendoza nodded. We'll find him, Elena. That's a promise. That night, the news reported the discovery of the bodies and Salinas' escape. After 7 years, the case of the Vasquez twins finally had resolution, although the main culprit had temporarily escaped. 3 days after the discovery of the bodies, Detective Mendoza was coordinating with Interpol on the international search for Germán Salinas. Elena had insisted on staying involved in every aspect of the investigation. Detective, we received information from the Miami police, reported Interpol Agent Commander Roberto Silva. What did they find? Salinas arrived at Miami Airport, but he never went through U.S. immigration. How is that possible? Apparently, he bought another ticket to the Cayman Islands using false documentation. Elena approached the operations table. False documentation? How did he get that? Criminals with money always have resources, Silva explained. He probably had fake passports prepared for years. Mendoza studied the flight map. The Cayman Islands don't have an extradition treaty with Mexico. Correct. If he gets there, it'll be much harder to arrest him. Can we intercept him before? His flight to Cayman has a layover in Jamaica. Jamaican authorities have been alerted. Elena reviewed the case documents. Detective, while we chase Germán, what about the others involved? Raul Dominguez has already confessed and is cooperating fully. Jorge Medina and Rosa Gonzalez were arrested yesterday. What did they say? Both admitted to receiving money for spying on the activities of Vasquez Construction. How many knew about the murder? Nothing directly, but their reports were what convinced Salinas that he had to act. Silva interrupted with new information. Detective, we just received confirmation. Salinas was arrested at Kingston Airport, Jamaica. Elena stood up excited. They arrested him? Are you sure? Completely. The Jamaican police detained him when he tried to board the flight to Cayman. When will they extradite him? That's more complicated. Jamaica does have an extradition treaty with Mexico, but the process can take several weeks. Mendoza picked up his phone. I'm going to contact the Mexican consulate in Jamaica. We need to speed up the process. While Mendoza made official calls, Elena received an unexpected call on her cell phone. Elena Vasquez. Yes, who is speaking? This is Fernando Castillo, attorney for Germán Salinas. Elena tensed. What do you want? My client is willing to completely confess in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. Mexico doesn't have the death penalty, but it does have life imprisonment. Germán prefers to negotiate a lesser sentence. Elena looked at Mendoza, who had heard part of the conversation. "Put it on speaker," Mendoza whispered. "Attorney Castillo is speaking with Elena Vasquez and Detective Mendoza." "Perfect, Detective. My client wants to make a full confession. Mr. Salinas is already an international fugitive. He's not in a position to negotiate, but he can provide information about the entire corruption network." Elena intervened. "What information? Names of corrupt officials, businessmen involved, exact amounts of money, methods of operation. In exchange for what? 25 years in prison instead of life." Mendoza considered the offer. "I'd have to consult with the prosecution's office, but first we need Salinas to return voluntarily to Mexico." "If he returns voluntarily, will you consider the negotiation?" "Possibly, but with no guarantees." Castillo briefly communicated with his client. "Salinas agrees to return voluntarily if you can guarantee he won't be lynched by the press or relatives. We can guarantee his physical safety, but he'll have to face the full legal consequences. Understood? When can you arrange his return?" Silva intervened. "We can have an extradition flight ready tomorrow." "Perfect. My client will be ready." After hanging up, Elena turned to Mendoza. "Detective, do you think we should accept a deal?" "It depends on what information he can provide. If he helps us dismantle the entire corruption network, it could be worth it." "But he murdered my brothers." "I know, Elena, but 25 years is a very long sentence, and we'd achieve justice for many other victims." Elena wrestled with conflicting emotions. "What if we don't accept the deal?" "Then we'd have to build the case only with the evidence we have. Dominguez has already confessed, we have the bodies, we have financial evidence." "Is that enough to convict him?" "Probably yes, but other criminals could escape." Silva added more information. "The corruption network Salinas describes could involve dozens of officials and businessmen. We're talking about hundreds of millions of pesos stolen." Elena sat down to consider the options. "How much time do we have to decide?" "The extradition flight arrives tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Guadalajara Airport," Mendoza replied. "He will be transferred immediately to headquarters." "And what security measures do we need?" "Closed route, police escort, rear entrance to headquarters." Elena thought of the 7 years of uncertainty that were finally coming to an end. "Detective, tomorrow we're going to learn the whole truth about Diego and Rodrigo. I wish you could be here to see it."
The extradition flight landed punctually at 2 p.m. at Guadalajara Airport. Germán Salinas descended from the plane handcuffed and escorted by 2 Interpol agents. A convoy of 3 patrol cars transferred him directly to the headquarters. Elena waited in the observation room, separated from the interrogation by a one-way glass. Detective Mendoza and the specialized prosecutor, Licenciado Mario Hernandez, prepared for the most important interrogation of their careers. Salinas entered the interrogation room accompanied by his lawyer, Fernando Castillo. He looked haggard after 3 days of escape and arrest. "Mr. Salinas," Mendoza began, "you are under arrest for the charges of aggravated homicide, government fraud, and fleeing justice." "My client is willing to fully confess," interrupted Castillo. "Before any confession, we need to establish the terms." Prosecutor Hernandez intervened. "What terms?" "If your client provides complete and truthful information about the entire corruption network, we will consider reducing the sentence from life imprisonment to 24 years in prison." Salinas looked at his lawyer, who nodded. "I accept," Salinas said in a broken voice. Mendoza activated the recorder. October 15, 2024, 3:30 p.m. Interrogation of Germán Salinas Mendoza for the homicides of Diego and Rodrigo Vasquez. Present: Detective Carlos Mendoza, Prosecutor Mario Hernandez, and Defense Attorney Fernando Castillo. "Mr. Salinas, you are confessing voluntarily." "Yes." "Did you murder Diego and Rodrigo Vasquez on March 15, 2017? Salinas breathed deeply. "Yes, I killed them." From the observation room,
Elena felt a mix of relief and pain upon finally hearing the truth. How did you kill them? I strangled them with my own hands. Why? Because they had seen something that could have destroyed my business. What exactly had they seen? They saw me handing cash to engineer Raúl Dominguez in exchange for government contracts. Mendoza leaned forward. Tell us exactly what happened on March 8, 2017. Dominguez came to my office to collect his monthly payment, 250,000 pesos in cash. How did the scheme work? I coordinated bribes from 5 construction companies. Each company paid between 10 and 15% of the contract value. Names of the companies: Salinas and Associates, Constructora del Bajío, Desarrollos Tapatíos, Inmobiliaria San Patricio, and Pavimentos del Occidente. How much money did you handle monthly? Approximately 2 million pesos in bribes, of which you kept how much? 1.2 million. Dominguez received 800,000. Prosecutor Hernandez did the mental calculation. 24 million pesos annually in bribes. Approximately, yes. How many years did this scheme operate? From 2015 until 2018. Why did it end in 2018? After the twins' murder, I became very nervous. I decided to gradually shut it down. Mendoza returned to the central topic. What happened when Diego and Rodrigo entered your office on March 8th? They came to deliver some documents from their father. They walked in without knocking. They saw the money. They saw the stacks of bills on my desk. They also saw Dominguez putting money into his briefcase. How did they react? They were stunned. Diego asked what all that money was. What did you tell them? I told them it was a business matter and that they hadn't seen anything. Did they accept that explanation? Rodrigo said it looked very strange. Diego asked if it was legal. What did you do then? I told them if they told anyone, there would be very big problems. You threatened them. Not directly, but I did tell them it was very important they kept their mouths shut. Elena listened to every word with a mix of horror and fascination. What happened after they left? Dominguez became hysterical. He said the boys had seen too much. What did Dominguez propose? Initially, nothing specific, but I knew we had a problem. Why was it such a big problem? Because Antonio Vasquez was my business partner. If the boys told him, he would investigate. And Antonio was very intelligent. What did you fear Antonio would discover? The entire scheme, all the no-bid contracts, all the bribes. Mendoza checked his notes. When did you decide you had to kill the twins? Not immediately. First, I waited to see if they would say anything. How did you know they had talked? Jorge Medina, the accountant of Constructora Vasquez, reported to me that the boys had come home very upset. Jorge Medina worked for you. Yes. I paid him 5,000 pesos a month for information about Antonio's activities. What else did he report? That the twins had told their father about the money exchange. How did Antonio react? According to Jorge, Antonio told them to keep quiet, but he started reviewing all my contracts. That alarmed you completely. Yes. Antonio had access to all the government information through his company. When did you make the final decision to kill the twins? Salinas broke down emotionally. On March 14, Jorge reported that Antonio had found irregularities in 3 contracts. What kind of irregularities? Contracts awarded without bidding for amounts much higher than market value. Did Antonio confront someone about this?
He called Dominguez to demand explanations. What did Dominguez tell you? Dominguez called me in a panic after speaking with Antonio. He said Antonio was very suspicious. Elena leaned closer to the glass. This was the information she had waited 7 years to hear. What did you decide to do with that information? That night, I couldn't sleep. I knew that if Antonio investigated further, we would all go to prison. I decided the only solution was to kill the twins. I thought that if the twins disappeared, Antonio would focus on looking for them instead of investigating the contracts. Mendoza frowned. That was your logic? I know, it sounds irrational now, but at that moment, it seemed like the only way out. How did you plan the murder? I called Dominguez and told him we had to act immediately. Did he agree? At first, no, but I explained that if we were discovered, we would both go to prison for decades. What was the specific plan? To intercept the twins on their way to the sports club, take them to my warehouse on the outskirts. What were you going to do at the warehouse? Initially, I thought of threatening them, scaring them so much they would never talk, but I changed my mind. When I had them there, I realized I could never trust them to stay quiet. Prosecutor Hernandez intervened. Describe exactly how you committed the murders. Salinas trembled before answering. I took them separately to the back of the warehouse. Who died first? Diego. I told him I just wanted to talk to him. How did you kill him? I put my hands around his neck. He tried to scream, but he couldn't. Elena covered her mouth to keep from vomiting. How long did it take? Maybe 3 minutes. It felt like hours. And Rodrigo? Rodrigo heard noises and started screaming. Dominguez had to help me restrain him. Dominguez participated directly in the murder? Yes, he helped me hold Rodrigo while I strangled him.
What did you do with the bodies? We buried them under the cement floor of the warehouse. That same night, we worked until 3 a.m. Mendoza stood up from his chair. What did you do with the twins' belongings? I buried them in the land behind my office. Why there? I wanted to keep them close as a reminder. A reminder of what? Of what I had done, of what it had cost to protect my business. The confession had lasted 3 hours. Elena had listened to every horrible detail of how her brothers had been murdered. When the interrogation ended, Mendoza walked into the observation room. Elena, are you all right? Finally, I know the truth. It's horrible, but at least there is no more uncertainty. What do you want to do now? I want everyone involved to be prosecuted, for them to pay for what they did. We will. Salinas gave us enough information to prosecute dozens of people. Elena looked toward the interrogation room, where Salinas was once again being handcuffed. 24 years are not enough for murdering 2 innocent teenagers. It's the best we could negotiate in exchange for dismantling the entire corruption network. I understand, Detective, but it hurts. Of course it hurts. But Diego and Rodrigo will finally have justice. 6 months after Herman Salinas' confession, Elena Vasquez was at the criminal court of Guadalajara for the final sentencing. Detective Mendoza accompanied her as he had throughout the entire process. "Are you ready for this?" asked Mendoza. "As ready as one can be after waiting 7 years." The 6th Criminal Court judge, Magistrate Roberto Castillo, entered the courtroom. Salinas, dressed in the orange prison uniform, stood along with his lawyer. In the case of the state of Jalisco versus Herman Salinas Mendoza for the crimes of aggravated homicide, government fraud, and criminal association, this court has reached the following resolution. Elena squeezed Mendoza's hand. The defendant, Herman Salinas Mendoza, is found guilty of all charges brought by the prosecution.
In consideration of his voluntary confession and cooperation in dismantling a corruption network that stole more than 150 million pesos from the public treasury, this court sentences the defendant to 24 years in prison with no possibility of parole. Elena felt a mix of relief and frustration, justice, but not the full justice she had hoped for. Does the defendant have anything to say before being transferred to prison? Salinas stood up slowly. Your Honor, I would like to address the Vázquez family. The judge looked at Elena, who nodded. Elena, I know nothing I say can bring back Diego and Rodrigo. Elena looked directly into his eyes for the first time in 7 years. I know what I did was monstrous. I killed 2 innocent boys for money. It wasn't just for money, Elena murmured. It was out of cowardice. You're right. I was a coward. I could have found another solution. What other solution? I could have ended the corruption scheme. I could have confessed. I could have accepted the consequences of my actions. Elena stood from her seat. Instead, you chose to murder my 16-year-old brothers. Yes, and I will have to live with that decision for the rest of my life. They cannot live the rest of their lives. You stole that opportunity from them. Salinas lowered his head. Elena, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just want you to know that not a day goes by without me thinking about what I did to them. That doesn't bring them back. No, nothing can do that. The judge intervened. Anything else, Mr. Salinas? Only that I hope my punishment serves as an example to others who might be considering the same path. This session is concluded. Officer, escort the convicted man to Guadalajara Penitentiary. Salinas was handcuffed and escorted out of the room. Elena did not look at him as he left. Outside the courthouse, several journalists awaited statements. Ms. Vázquez, are you satisfied with the sentence? 24 years won't bring my brothers back, but at least Herman Salinas will pay for his crimes. What message do you have for other families who have lost loved ones? That they should never stop seeking the truth, never give up. Diego and Rodrigo were missing for 7 years, but we finally got answers. What do you plan to do now? Continue honoring your brother's memory? Maybe work with other families who are going through similar situations. Detective Mendoza stepped up to the microphones. I want to add that this investigation exposed a corruption network involving 18 public officials and 12 businessmen. All were prosecuted. 17 officials were sentenced. 8 businessmen are in prison. We recovered approximately 80 million pesos stolen from the people of Jalisco. Do you consider this case completely closed? Legally, yes, but the impact of these crimes will last for years. After the interviews, Elena and Mendoza walked toward the Mesquiton cemetery where Diego and Rodrigo had finally been buried 6 months earlier. Detective, I want to thank you for everything you did for my family. I just did my job. Elena, you did much more than that. You never gave up when others had already forgotten the case. Diego and Rodrigo deserved justice. All young people deserve justice. They reached the twins' graves. Elena had ordered a black marble headstone with a photograph of both of them. Diego and Rodrigo, beloved brothers, 2001 to 2017. Their truth was finally revealed. Elena placed fresh flowers on both graves. Brothers, you can now rest in peace. The man who hurt you is paying for his crimes. She remained silent for several minutes. Detective, do you think they know we obtained justice? If there's something after death, I'm sure they know it. What will you do now? Continue working on missing persons cases? There are too many families still searching for answers. Can I help in some way? How? Maybe we could create a foundation to help families of the disappeared get resources for private investigations. That would be an excellent way to honor the memory of Diego and Rodrigo. I'll do it. It will be called the Vázquez Twins Foundation. What services would it offer? Private investigators for abandoned cases, legal support for families, media pressure for forgotten cases. You have my full support. Elena looked one last time at her brothers' graves. Diego, Rodrigo, your death was not in vain. You're going to help other families find the truth. When they left the cemetery, Elena felt different. For the first time in 7 years, she no longer had that constant feeling of uncertainty. The pain from the loss of her brothers would never disappear, but at least there were no longer unanswered questions. Detective, there's something else I want to tell you. What is it? Before he died, my father told me that if one day we found the truth, I shouldn't allow hatred to consume my life. And at first I wanted Salinas to die in prison. I wanted him to suffer as much as we suffered. And now I just want the 24 years in prison to give him enough time to fully understand what he did. That's a very mature perspective. Diego and Rodrigo were good boys, Detective. They would never have wanted their deaths to create more hatred in the world. I'm sure they'd be proud of the woman their sister has become. Elena smiled for the first time in a long time. Thank you, Detective, for everything. 6 months later, the Vasquez Twins Foundation had helped solve 3 missing persons cases in Jalisco. Elena was working full-time, coordinating investigations and providing support to affected families. Detective Mendoza had been promoted to commander of the Missing Persons Division. His work in the Vasquez case had established new protocols for disappearance investigations. Herman Salinas was serving his sentence in prison, where he had begun working in a rehabilitation program. According to reports from the guards, he was a model prisoner who helped other inmates with legal paperwork. Raul Dominguez had been sentenced to 18 years for second-degree murder and corruption. Jorge Medina and Rosa Gonzalez received 5-year sentences for complicity. The government contract awarding system in Jalisco had been completely reformed, with new controls and mandatory transparency. But more important than all the legal and systemic consequences, Elena Vasquez had found peace. Not the complete closure she had once imagined, but something better, the certainty that she had fought to the end for her brothers, and she had won. Diego and Rodrigo Vasquez, the twin brothers of a businessman who had disappeared in Guadalajara, were finally resting in peace. Their story had ended, but their legacy of justice was only just beginning. Epilogue, 5 years later. Elena Vasquez, now 35 years old, received a call at her office in the Vasquez Twins Foundation. Elena, this is Commander Mendoza. We have news about Salinas. What kind of news? He died in prison this morning. Heart attack. Elena felt a strange mix of emotions. How many years of his sentence had he served? 5 years, 4 months. Less than a quarter of what he was supposed to pay. Yes, but he finally paid with his life. Elena stayed silent for many minutes. Elena, are you there? Yes, Commander. I'm just processing the information. How do you feel? I don't know. I thought I would feel more satisfied, but I don't. It feels empty, like a very long chapter of my life has ended. Maybe that's exactly what I needed. Elena looked at the photographs of Diego and Rodrigo on her desk. Commander, can you do me a favor? Of course. I don't want this to reach the press. Not yet. Why? Because I don't want Salinas's death to become the news. I want the news to continue being the lives of my brothers and the work we're doing. I understand perfectly. Elena hung up the phone and left her office. In the main hall of the Vasquez Twins Foundation, 3 private investigators were working on active missing persons cases. Any updates on the cases? Asked Elena. Yes, we found new leads in the Morales family case. What kind of leads? Witnesses who saw the 3 missing brothers at a market in Tijuana 2 weeks ago. Reliable witnesses. Very reliable. And we have photos from security cameras. Elena walked over to the computer where Carmen was showing the images. It's definitely them. Have you contacted the parents yet? We're calling them in tomorrow. We want to be completely sure before giving them hope. Elena nodded. For 5 years, the Vasquez Twins Foundation had solved 17 missing persons cases. Not all had ended well, but every family received answers. Carmen, I'm going out for the rest of the day. Can you handle operations? Of course. Is everything all right? Yes, I just need to process some news. Elena drove to the Mesquitan Cemetery. It was her first visit in several months. She usually goes every week, but her work at the foundation had kept her very busy. She sat in front of Diego and Rodrigo's graves. Brothers, Herman Salinas died today in prison. The wind moved the flowers she had left the previous week. I don't know if I should feel relieved or sad. Part of me wanted him to live long enough to serve his full sentence. But maybe this is better. Maybe now I can fully close this chapter and focus on helping other families. She cleaned the gravestones with a damp cloth she always carried in her bag. You know what's the strangest thing? I don't feel hatred towards him anymore. For years, hatred was what kept me going. But now, I just feel empty. She stood up and walked to a nearby bench.
Commander Mendoza says that it's normal, that when such a long search ends, there is always an adjustment period. She took out her phone and dialed the number of her mother, who had been living in Puerto Vallarta since her husband's death. Mom. Hello, my love. How are you? I need to tell you something. Germán Salinas died in prison. Her mother remained silent for several seconds. How do you feel? Confused. I thought I would feel more satisfied. My love, satisfaction doesn't come from the death of others. It comes from knowing we did the right thing, and we did the right thing. Of course, we sought the truth, we got justice, and now you are helping other families. Do you think Dad would be proud? Your dad would be extremely proud. Not only did you get justice for Diego and Rodrigo, but you turned their death into something that helps others. I miss them so much, Mom. I do too, my love, but they are in a better place. Do you think there's really something after death? I don't know for sure, but I like to think your dad is looking after the twins. After hanging up, Elena returned to the graves. Brothers, I think I can finally say goodbye. She placed her hands on the tombstones, not goodbye forever, but goodbye to the search, goodbye to uncertainty, goodbye to constant pain. She stayed there until the sun began to set. I will keep remembering you every day, but now I will remember you as the joyful boys you were, not as the victims you became. That night, when she arrived home, Elena sat at her desk and wrote a letter she had been postponing for years. Dear Diego and Rodrigo, it has been 8 years since we lost you. 8 years of searching, pain, uncertainty, and finally, justice. Today, the man who killed you died. I don't know if I should feel relieved or sad. What I do know is that his death marks the end of a very long chapter of our lives. During these years, I have tried to honor your memory in every way possible. I created a foundation that carries your name. We have helped 17 families find their missing loved ones. We have reformed laws. We have changed police protocols. But more important than all of that, I have learned to live without you. Not to forget you, but to build a life that includes you without letting pain define it. Dad died without knowing the truth, but I am sure that now he knows. Mom is doing well, living by the sea as she always wanted. Commander Mendoza is still working on missing persons cases, saving other families from the pain we endured. And I finally found peace.
Not the peace of revenge, but the peace of knowing that I did everything humanly possible for you, that I searched until I found answers, that I fought until I got justice, that I turned your death into something that helps others. I love you, I miss you, but I no longer look for you at every corner hoping you will come back. Now I carry you with me in a different way. Your sister who will never forget you, Elena. Elena placed the letter in her desk drawer next to the last photographs they had taken together. The next day, Elena returned to her work at the foundation with renewed energy. The Morales family arrived at 10 a.m. to receive news about their 3 missing sons. Mr. and Mrs. Morales, we have very good news. Mrs. Morales clutched her husband's hand. They were found. We found them alive and well in Tijuana. Apparently, they crossed the border several months ago looking for work. The parents hugged each other, crying with joy. When can we see them? Our investigators are already coordinating with immigration authorities. You will be able to reunite with them tomorrow. Elena watched the parents' happiness and felt a deep satisfaction. This was the reason she had created the foundation. This was the right way to honor Diego and Rodrigo's memory. After the Morales family left, Carmen approached Elena. How do you feel after solving another case? Complete. As if each family we reunite brings Diego and Rodrigo a little closer to home. Do you think they know what you're doing? Elena looked at the photographs of her brothers on the wall. I don't know, but I like to think they do. That afternoon, Elena received a call from Commander Mendoza. Elena, do you have time for lunch tomorrow? Of course. Any special reason? I want to propose something to you. A project that could expand the reach of the foundation. What kind of project? An academy to train investigators specialized in missing persons cases. Elena straightened in her chair. That sounds very ambitious. It is, but I think it's the next logical step. Where would we locate it? The state government is willing to donate a building, and I have contacts in universities who could provide instructors. Elena considered the proposal. How many investigators could we train per year? Possibly 50. Imagine the impact that would have. Elena thought of Diego and Rodrigo, of the thousands of families still searching for answers, of the legacy she wanted to build. Commander, I think my brothers would approve of this project. Does that mean you're interested? It means I'm fully committed. 6 months later, the Gemelos Vázquez Academy for Missing Persons Investigators opened its doors. Elena gave the inaugural speech in front of the first 50 students. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an institution born from pain, but existing to give hope. My brothers Diego and Rodrigo Vázquez were murdered 8 years ago by a man who valued money more than human life. For 7 years, my family lived in the most terrible uncertainty that can exist, not knowing what had happened to our loved ones. You're here to ensure that other families do not have to live in that uncertainty for so long. Every case you solve, every family you reunite, every answer you provide honors the memory of all the people who have disappeared. Diego and Rodrigo cannot come back, but their legacy can help bring thousands of others home. Welcome to the Gemelos Vázquez Academy for Missing Persons Investigators. The applause of the students echoed throughout the auditorium. Elena looked toward the ceiling and whispered, "This is for you, brothers, so that your death has the greatest meaning possible." After the ceremony, Elena walked through the halls of the academy. On the walls were photographs of all the cases solved by the foundation over the last 5 years. 17 cases, 17 families reunited, 17 happy endings made possible thanks to Diego and Rodrigo. In her office, Elena had a new photograph of her brothers, an image of when they were 15 years old, smiling during a family vacation in Puerto Vallarta. She no longer remembered them as victims, but as the vibrant young men they had been. The phone rang. It was another case, another desperate family looking for answers. Gemelos Vázquez Foundation? This is Elena speaking. Mrs. Vázquez, my daughter disappeared 3 days ago. The police say it's too soon to investigate, but I know something bad happened. Elena grabbed a notebook and a pen. Tell me everything from the beginning. We are going to find your daughter. As she listened to the details of the new case, Elena realized she had found her purpose in life. Diego and Rodrigo died, but their death had given birth to something much greater, a system to help other families avoid the pain she had lived. It was not the ending she had imagined 8 years ago when her brothers disappeared, but it was an ending that made sense. It was an ending that turned tragedy into hope. It was finally an ending in peace.